Summary of David and Goliath by Malcolm Gladwell. Gladwell starts by telling the story of the fight between David and Goliath, which takes place in the valley of Elah when the Israelites and Philistines meet. Both armies are afraid to move forward because it would make them more exposed, so the Philistines send Goliath, their biggest warrior, to fight David alone. At first, none of the Israelites want to fight Goliath because he is so big, but then a small shepherd boy named David steps up. King Saul tries to stop David from going, but in the end he lets him go because no one else will. David runs into the valley with only his stick and a few smooth stones, which he puts in a sling and throws at the enemy. Goliath gets hit in the head with the stone, which knocks him down. David takes this chance to pick up Goliath's sword and cut off the giant's head. Gladwell says that this story is important because it shows not only that underdogs can beat giants, but also that the things that make a person strong are often the things that make them lose. On the other hand, some bad things can actually turn out to be good. To show this, he says that Goliath fails because he is too big to do anything about David's arrow. Also, David wins because he is smaller and can act quickly. Since he is not a trained warrior, he has to think outside the box, which is how he comes up with the idea to kill Goliath with a bullet. Gladwell uses Vivek Ranadive, an Indian refugee who lives in California and coaches his daughter Anjali's basketball team, to study how underdog stories work. Vivek Ranadive has never played hoops before, and the people on his team aren't very good. Ranadive, on the other hand, sees that most basketball teams only play defense under their own basket, even though it is legal to put pressure on the offense as soon as the ball is inbound. So, he shows his team how to play the full court press, which is a defense that uses the whole court. This strategy makes up for the team's lack of skills and catches other teams off guard. Ranadive's team makes it to the national championships this way, but they have to stop running the play in their last game because an unfair judge takes out his anger on them by calling fouls on them. Once the team stops playing the full court press, they lose, but not before showing that they can fight with much better teams. Gladwell says that Ranadive's team's weaknesses helped them be successful because they wouldn't have played the full court press if they didn't have to find ways to protect their flaws. This shows that what people think of as benefits and disadvantages aren't always right, since disadvantages can be good in some situations and advantages can be bad in others. Gladwell uses this way of thinking to education, focusing on Teresa DeBrito, the principal of Shepog Valley Middle School in Connecticut. Most people in the U.S. think that smaller class sizes lead to better student performance, but Gladwell says that study isn't clear on this point. Also, some teachers would rather have big classes than very small ones, because it's hard to keep the attention of a small group of students. Because of this, DeBrito fears that the number of students at Shepog Valley is going down. To show how bad the problem is, Gladwell says that groups should be smaller when there are already too many students, like 30 kids. If, on the other hand, a class is already small, making it even smaller won't help the environment as a whole. So, the best class has about the right number of people. Even so, prestigious schools still say that they have small class sizes, and parents still like this plan. Gladwell says that the reason people still want small classes is because society puts too much emphasis on what's thought to be good. For example, most people think that kids who go to Ivy League schools will do well no matter what. Gladwell tells the story of Caroline Sachs, a young woman who does well in school, to explain this idea. Sachs has always wanted to be a scientist and is usually the best student in her class. When it comes time to choose a college, she chooses Brown University over the University of Maryland. This seems like a good choice, given Brown's reputation for being a good school. But Sachs doesn't like going to Brown because everyone there is so smart and competitive. By the time Sachs is a sophomore, her chemistry classes have made her feel so down that she chooses to stop studying science. Gladwell says that this is something that happens a lot at top schools. In fact, research shows that students who want to become scientists would be better off going to mediocre schools, where they'd be a big fish in a small pond, than Ivy League schools, where they'd be a small fish in a big pond, because Ivy League schools are so competitive that many smart students drop out of the sciences because they're too discouraged to keep going. The problems Sachs had at Brown were discouraging, but Gladwell says there are desirable difficulties, or problems that lead to good results. To show this, he talks about David Boys, a man with autism who has trouble in school. Because Boys has trouble reading, he learns to be a great listener. This helps him do well as a lawyer, because he knows how to listen for small details that other investigators miss. He is now one of the most sought-after lawyers in the country. Gladwell goes on to say that dyslexia is often a desirable difficulty. He tells the story of Gary Cohn, who has dyslexia and has to fail a lot because of it. This makes him feel like he has nothing to lose when he puts himself out there to get a job as an options trader on Wall Street. So, even though he doesn't know anything about finance, he goes to great lengths to get an interview. He finally gets the job and goes on to become the president of Goldman Sachs. Gladwell says that in both of these cases, something else is also at play, a personality trait called disagreeability, which makes a person not care what other people think. Gladwell looks at the life of a doctor named Jay Friereich to show how unexpectedly good hard times can be and how important it is to be able to disagree. Friereich's father killed himself when he was a young boy, so he grew up in terrible poverty. He went through a lot of hard times as a child, so when he went to medical school, he was even more determined to do well. His first job is at the National Cancer Institute on the ward for children with leukemia. This is probably the most sad job a doctor can get, since childhood leukemia is so persistent and causes so much pain. Friereich thinks he's been through worse, though, so he doesn't let the hopelessness of his job make him sad. This allows him to keep trying to find a fix. But in order to do this, he has to try a number of unorthodox methods that make many doctors angry. He doesn't care what people think, though, because he's focused on finding a fix. Even though some of his methods hurt children, he thinks that since they're going to die anyway, he might as well do whatever it takes to find a cure. So, he comes up with a new way to treat childhood leukemia, which is now cured in 90% of cases. Gladwell then talks about the civil rights movement. He says that Martin Luther King Jr. and the Baptist preacher Wyatt Walker were able to stand up against segregation because they were used to being the underdogs. Wyatt Walker also knew that if you want to stand up to power, you have to think outside the box and use clever tricks. He goes to Birmingham, Alabama, to try to get the racist public safety commissioner, Bull Connor, to do something that will make people all over the country angry and pay attention to the movement. Walker fails at first, but he eventually helps a large group of kids organize a protest and convinces Bull Connor to send police dogs after them so that reporters can take pictures of angry officers sending bloodthirsty dogs after children. This leads to a picture that gets people talking about racism and segregation all over the country. Gladwell says that this is a great example of how losers can use different tactics to turn the power of their opponents against them. Still thinking about what power is, Gladwell moves on to talk about the Troubles, which was a 30-year war between Catholics and Protestants in Northern Ireland and the British military. Gladwell tells the story of an event that happened in the small Catholic town of Lower Falls, where the British Army, which didn't like Catholics, went looking for illegal guns. This makes the people angry, and after the search is over, they throw stones at the soldiers as the British troops leave. Even though the British Army could just keep going, they turn around because they have been told to punish people who try to stop them. This causes a bloody fight that leads to a curfew where people can't even leave their homes to get food for several days. The curfew only ends when a steady stream of Catholic women from a nearby neighborhood march to Lower Falls, showing solidarity with the residents and causing the soldiers to leave because they don't know how else to respond to the women's peaceful actions. Gladwell says that the British's biggest mistake in this situation was that they thought their power was stronger than it was. With this in mind, Gladwell tells the story of how Mike Reynolds, a man from California, got the state to make a 3-strikes law after 2 ex-convicts killed his daughter. After this tragedy, Reynolds tried to do something about California's high crime rate. Eventually, he helped pass a law called 3 strikes, which made sure that people who broke the law a third time would go to jail for 25 years to life. Reynolds is very proud of this, but Gladwell and many criminologists think that 3 strikes did more harm than good because it made prisons too full and may have even made crime go up, although experts disagree about how the law really worked. Still, Gladwell says that Reynolds' attempts to change the criminal justice system may have been misguided because he put too much faith in the idea that strict laws and harsh authority can bring about good change. In the end, Gladwell looks at the life of a French Protestant pastor named André Trocmé, who publicly hid Jewish people during World War II, to show that some kinds of authority are just useless when dealing with underdogs. Even though everyone in Trocmé's town, Le Chambon-sur-Ligne, is honest about helping Jews escape persecution, the Nazis are not able to stop them. Gladwell says that this is mostly because Trocmé makes it clear that he doesn't care what happens to him. He will always stand up for what he believes in, no matter what. So, the Nazis don't know what to do with him because killing him wouldn't stop what he stands for or the movement he leads. Gladwell, on the other hand, says that even the scariest kinds of authority are often made powerless by underdogs who are brave enough to stand up to them.
About the author. Born in England, Malcolm Gladwell grew up in Canada. He went to the University of Toronto to study history. After that, he moved to Indiana to work for the right magazine, The American Spectator. By the late 1980s, Gladwell had risen to become a reporter for the Washington Post, where he covered science and business news. Over time, he learned that he was good at breaking down complicated information for a general audience. Gladwell has been working for The New Yorker since 1996, when he first started. His first book, The Tipping Point, was based on an article he wrote for The New Yorker called The Tipping Point. This piece made him famous. After The Tipping Point came out in 2000, Gladwell was asked to talk at many businesses, think tanks, and colleges. Since 2000, he has written 4 popular books, including Blink, Outliers, David and Goliath, and Talking to Strangers. He still writes for The New Yorker and gives talks around the world as a guest speaker.
Hope we summarized it fully and you liked it. Please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel so that we are motivated to create more videos.